All right, so it appears we have some breaking news here. So there's this really big issue that's a really, really big deal for Americans that has been given Trump actually a big benefit in the poll numbers and his chance of reelection. And that issue is actually the economy. So that's consistently rated as the most important issue to basically everybody, including young people. It's not Palestine for young people, it's the economy. But he continues to edge out. He was especially edging out Biden. Biden was credited with the lagging inflation, and now inflation is pretty low. It's pretty close to the Fed's target rate of 2%. But because we had inflation for so long, prices are sort of the integral of those derivatives, right? So our price level is now it's high, right? We have a high price level. Price level has never really been an actual measure of economic status that people have used. It's always been CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is the change in prices, never in the price itself. So we're kind of in a new era now where I think we're kind of trending towards new economic measures. But what we can see here is this article. It says, more Americans trust Harris to handle economy. First time in a year a Democrat has led in the key issue. Harris's recovery on economic trust rating could stem from broader voter concerns about Biden's age. So there's a new survey from Financial Times at the University of Michigan shows Vice President Kamala Harris eating away at one of Donald Trump's key political advantages. For months, voters have indicated in numerous surveys that they trusted Republicans and Trump more in the economy. A wide range of explanations was given for this, but much of it ties back to the sharp rise in consumer prices and other monumental shifts in the economy that occurred as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It talks about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But so it says President Joe Biden has languished under the political consequence of these back-to-back economic body blows toward his presidency, and in repeated polls of the 2024 election trailed Trump on trust ratings for economic issues including inflation. But his Vice President Harris may not be weighed down by that same political baggage. The Financial Times survey released Sunday found Harris making a sharp improvement over Biden's economic trust numbers. Biden had languished around 35% of the vote on who voters trust to handle the economy, while Trump sat at 41%. However, Biden dropped out of the race, and now voters say they trust Harris at 42%, just beating the number of those who said they would trust Trump. The vice president now leads her opponent by a hair, making it the first time the Democratic candidate has led the Republican on the subject this year. So we can see this graph here. It's like a very, very quick sort of summary by Newswire. They say Harris edges out Trump 42 to 41% on voter trust in the economy, marking the first Democratic lead since the survey began. So this is really huge because this is kind of like the one big edge Trump had over Biden, or one of them at least, but this kind of thing was the major one, and this is still holding for Harris as well. So I think trust ratings, like who you trust more, who's more honest. I think like even the polls now have flipped in terms of like who do you think is too old to be president, and almost nobody says Harris. Maybe it's like 10 or 12%, something really small, and then Trump is something like in the 50s, 40s, 50s. So the sort of conversation has flipped now between Biden and Trump, where now it's like Harris and Trump is much different, where she's not going to be like the old candidate, so that's not going to be the big thing on the ballot. And then people also are going to view, it looks like Kamala Harris is more favorably in terms of being honest and those kinds of things against Trump as well. But the thing that seemed to still be lagging continuously up until now, the big lag appeared to be this economy, this trust in the economy, because the economy almost always anyways, just regardless generally, is the most important thing. And in terms of incumbency predictions as to whether the incumbent president is going to win, the biggest indicator is pretty much the last year of the economy and approval ratings, basically, and that's why Trump lost, right? But what's weird about this election seems to be like a lot of people seem to be who are voting for Trump, they're kind of voting for him as if he were the incumbent going based off of his first 3 years in office. So they're like, oh man, like I want those 3 years back where there was low inflation and that kind of stuff, right? And prices were much lower back then. And so a lot of people want that time back. Now, obviously, Trump didn't do anything to get that economy. He was just coasting off of Obama's economy. The economy he actually had some impact on was a crash economy, right? Now, I know COVID obviously was out of his hands, but he had a lot of potential things that he could have done in that scenario, and he kind of punted on it and tried to pretend like it's not even real, which I think was a really stupid strategy. But, it seems like that's kind of the way things are going. And so for Harris to be able to do this is a big deal. In terms of her kind of having this baggage gone where they're not associating it with her, on one line it makes sense in that, like, okay, well, she's the vice president. The vice president is pretty weak constitutionally. The vice president really has nothing. I think, I forget who the first vice president actually was. I don't know if it was John Adams, but I think I remember learning that he was like talking to George Washington, like, dude, I have nothing to fucking do. Like, give me something to do, bitch. That's what I remember learning. So the VP is actually really weak, especially constitutionally. But the other thing is, like, if she's president, like, economically, what are going to be the big differences policy wise between them that would make like this big difference in the economy? Again, a lot of the stuff in the economy is really outside of the president's hands, anyways. So on one hand, it makes sense, but really, when you think about it, I think logically it doesn't really make much sense because, like, what is the big differences on policy going to be? So I think we're kind of seeing some weird behavior from voters, and it can be kind of unpredictable in terms of, like, well, what are the big differences that Biden would do or would have done? I mean, she would have done basically the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, maybe something marginally different, or what would it have been? And you think it would have made a major impact on inflation or anything? Like, dude, are you, like, seriously? Like, what major impacts on inflation do you think she would have made, or anything like that? So again, voters, I think, are acting kind of bizarrely in terms of this, right? She's not being tucked with the baggage of this. And again, this is where it's really important, where it's not what is, but what people think is. That's what matters in elections. This is huge. This is effing huge, guys, because this is really the only last kind of thing that I think was holding out for Trump. And given that it's the biggest thing, it's super important. And so there's also another article I found. It says, Harris erases Trump's lead on economy among younger Americans, CNBC Generation Lab survey finds. Again, a lot of people think that Israel-Palestine is like this huge issue for young people. Again, the numbers and the evidence say that's not true. It's actually, again, just the economy over again, right? That's just what the numbers say. It says younger Americans do not appear to hold Vice President Kamala Harris responsible for what many of them believe is a worsening U.S. economy under the Biden-Harris administration. The last quarterly youth and money survey taken after Biden dropped out of the race in July reveals that 69%, nice, of Americans between 18 and 34 years old believe the economy is getting worse under President Joe Biden. But they also think the candidate best able to improve the economy is the de facto Dem nominee Harris, not Republican nominee and former President Donald Trump. Harris was viewed as the best candidate for the economy by 41% of the poll respondents, while 40% chose Trump, while 19% said the economy would do better under someone else, like third-party candidate RFK. The results amount to a 7-point swing in Democrats' favor on the economy. Since CNBC asked the same question in May's Youth and Money survey, at the time, only 34% of respondents believed Biden, then likely Democrat nominee, was the best candidate to boost the economy, with 40% choosing Trump and 25% saying Kennedy. So it looks like there's no boost in terms of Trump. Trump actually has the exact same numbers. It's just that the RFK and third-party numbers are going down, which makes sense. That seems to be kind of in line with a lot of the Biden numbers, especially if you look at the old Biden polls. Like, RFK and third-party people are getting crazy numbers, and I think with how high RFK was polling at like 15%, he's nowhere close to that now. But before was basically because of, I think, largely people obviously not wanting Biden, and then also Trump, I think, as well, but largely Biden. So it doesn't appear that she's really she's not flipping anybody, but she's pulling third partiers, and you'd have to wonder how much this would have converged if Biden was still the nominee. Because I still think the convergence theorem would have held, where it's like we got closer and closer to the election, more of those like third party people would have gone towards Biden. But the other thing is if she's able to pick up where he would have been in mid-October by like early August or mid-August, that's like 2 months of potential where you could go upside. The only downside is also a potential for you to go down, but hopefully that doesn't happen. And they say the shift in voting support for Harris even wider among respondents overall. Presidential election were held today. Liz poll found Harris holding a 12-point lead over Trump among younger Americans, 46-34, while 21% said they would vote for Kennedy or another candidate. So looks like she's still got a lot of work to do according to this specific poll on this, although a 46-34 lead I think is pretty out of the ordinary. I think it's usually a lot higher in the poll numbers that I've seen. So, but according to this one, there's a lot more work to do. But I don't think that a 12-point lead is very typical for this. But this is really huge news, and I think that this might be the big driving force potentially behind this kind of if there's a surge going on with younger Americans kind of pulling away from third partiers. It's likely because of that, not because of Israel-Palestine or anything like that, because the polls say that that's like the second least important issue for young people. But this is a huge deal because you're basically undercutting Trump on like the one thing that he had, and you can just see this chart, right? This chart is like a really big change. So let's see kind of if this is able to hold. And again, pretty surprising that they're like, oh yeah, Biden, he had a bad economy, but I trust Harris, who has basically the same policy positions to kind of change the economy. So pretty interesting stuff from voters. Always fascinating to see kind of what's going on in voters' minds. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below.